Now, evidently, a lot of my videos trigger the strap-on fanboy. It's rather strange, really, because these individuals, they are they're avid followers of the sport of Formula One, but they're also avid followers of a channel that they don't like. Now, most of us normal people, that if we don't like something, we just don't bother watching it. All right, I don't like that. They're talking a load of rubbish. I won't bother. But these lads, the strap-on fanboy, they subscribe to that and want to have an argument with everything that's being presented. Now, lads, what I need to explain to you is that you too can educate yourself. And if you disagree with something that I present in a video, the best thing for you to do is use what is at your disposal, your own YouTube channel, to make a video to expose that what I'm saying is completely wrong, because that's what I do. Okay, if something is going on and it's wrong, what I do, I make a video and I evidence what the dynamic is that is wrong. Okay, so the problem that we are exposing is that Max Verstappen has just received a one place grid drop for committing an infringement, that infringement being he has impeded another driver. Okay, so what do we look at in determining the validity of that penalty? Well, what we do, and I'm going to show you how to do this, lads. We go to the FIA website, and we'll go on, because this is what I do. This is what I do. What Grand Prix are we on now? Qatar, aren't we? Let's have a look at the Qatar Grand Prix document. So there we are, and we come down here, and where do we go? Infringement, car one, alleged driving unnecessarily slowly. Now, if this is a decision, all right, and it's been determined that it's an infringement, then it's no longer an allegation. It's a determination that that indeed has taken place. So we remove the word alleged, but not the FIA. So when you click on that, it downloads a PDF to your device and you can have a look at it. And they give you this explanation, okay, and they give the decision a drop of one grid position, and they give you their reasoning, okay. Now, the issue here, whether or not you like Max Verstappen, is what they've done is they've given him a penalty of a one grid position drop. Now, that's not standard. Standard is at least a three grid position drop, depending on the severity of what has actually taken place. Now, context. This infringement has taken place in qualifying. Qualifying impacts the outcome of the race because depending on how you qualify, it determines your opportunities in the race. If you qualify higher up the grid, you've got a much better chance in the race. That's obvious. If you qualify halfway down the grid, then by the end of lap one, lap two, you're already 8 seconds behind the leader due to the natural field spread. You try gaining 8 seconds over the course of a Grand Prix. Well, you have to be significantly faster than those around you then. Difficult. Okay, so this infringement has taken place during qualifying and it has affected his rival's chance of setting a fast lap time. It has made his warm up of those tyres compromised, and it's meant that he's got dust on those tyres, which is going to compromise his grip. Yeah, that is what the impact of what Max Verstappen has done there, and that is the penalty that got applied. So, what we need to then do is say, well, that doesn't seem right. As fans of the sport, we kind of know that that's not the standard penalty that we've been seen issued elsewhere. So let's go back over the course of the season and determine whether that's true. So we go back to the first race of the season, which was the Bahrain Grand Prix. We'll have a look at there. This is a set of documents from Bahrain. And if we go back down to qualifying and what was going on there, there doesn't appear to be any infringements of such nature at Bahrain. Okay, so we'll leave that one alone because there's nothing to see there in that regard at Bahrain. Next race of the season was the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, so we'll have a look at the documents for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. We click on Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, list of documents from the FIA come up, and we come along here. So, for example, decision, alleged false start. the FIA are just atrocious with their inconsistencies. So, from the bottom here, summons car 44, alleged impeding of car 2. Okay, car 44, alleged impeding of car 2, infringement, car 44, impeding of car 2. So that doesn't say alleged infringement, alleged impeding. It says impeding. They're determining that indeed he did impede. Okay, that's the way it works, lads. That's one of the points I'm trying to make. Just going down here, there's no other kind of alleged infringements. It's just this one of car 44. So when we click on that one, it brings up the document. Now this took place in practice 2. Practice 2 doesn't determine the grid order. It doesn't determine ultimately where these cars start for the race, and therefore doesn't impact their race. Okay, so the severity of the impact that Hamilton is having on his fellow competitor is less in terms of the impact that it's going to have on their Grand Prix. All right, so the fact is that Hamilton has unnecessarily impeded, and the circumstances are such that the stewards heard from the drivers, okay, reviewed all the evidence, as you would expect, review evidence of what happened, not what he said, she said. Let's see what's going on with our own eyes and look at the data. Yeah, let's look at that. Car 2 had to take evasive action by going off the track. Indeed, they did, okay? And that was due to what Lewis Hamilton did. Fair enough. Okay. Having listened to the team radio, it was clear to us that the team of car 44 failed to warn their driver of the fact that car 2 was arriving on a fast lap. That was a serious failure on the part of the team, particularly given the speeds on this circuit and the nature of turn 11, which is at the end of a series of high-speed corners where the driver is visibly impaired. We therefore issued a warning to the driver and imposed a fine of €15,000 on the team. So this is the difference. It's a different circuit. The dynamics are slightly different. The visibility is different. The session is different. You can actually review this incident. Close calls. Jeddah, free practice 2, Logan Sargent, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso. There are lots of close calls there. The car following Lewis Hamilton was Carlos Sainz. Lewis Hamilton was focusing on what he needed to do with relation to Carlos Sainz. It very much appeared that Lewis Hamilton was trying to leave the door open for Carlos Sainz, and in doing that, he then caused the impeding of Logan Sargent. So if you have a look at that, chaotic close calls, Jeddah FP2, I'll leave a link to that in the description of this video, you will see that Lewis Hamilton wasn't checking his mirrors, knowing that George Russell was there for the previous bit of time, wasn't hogging the racing line, purposefully going slow and forcing George Russell off the track, which is what Max Verstappen was guilty of in qualifying at Qatar. But Lewis Hamilton got found guilty of an infringement. There was a €15,000 fine imposed, but there was a set of different circumstances. His ability to observe the fact that Logan Sargent was going to be arriving there, and therefore Hamilton had to be out of the way of it, that wasn't as easy for Hamilton to accomplish. Okay, he should have been receiving direction from his team, giving him that information when he himself will find it difficult due to the twists and turns of that track to actually identify that. He was also focusing on the fact it was Carlos Sainz that he felt was the car that he actually needed to not impede. Okay, and in doing that, a car arriving at speed from behind Sainz was then the car that he ultimately impeded. It was in a practice session rather than qualifying session and didn't affect Logan Sargent's chances in that Grand Prix due to the qualifying position that then Logan Sargent was able to achieve, and hence you don't take away position from Hamilton's race chances as a result of that. Okay, now that is the difference in the situation. We could all have arguments based on our own preferences, but you've got to understand that there is a different set of circumstances in play here. That is when you have this notion of mitigating circumstance. There is no mitigating circumstance when you have good visibility about what's going on. You're in qualifying, you know you're going to impede your fellow competitor, and you impede your fellow competitor. That's a different dynamic altogether to a practice session where somebody is looking out for the car behind them, and it's the car behind them that they then ultimately do end up impeding. And it didn't appear that there was any conscious decision to do that by Lewis Hamilton. So that was that situation. We can then go back to here. If you go and look at that video that I've just recommended, you'll see that the other cars that were guilty of impeding, there is no mention of them on here. No mention. Just Lewis Hamilton. So we'll then move on to the next race of the season, which was the Australian Grand Prix. So we come up to here, Australian Grand Prix, documents load up. We'll come down here and we'll come to, so there's the final starting grid. Prior to that, what was going on? Infringement. Car 11 impeding car 27. So the summons was alleged impeding. All right. The infringement is impeding. Okay. The infringement isn't alleged. The infringement is impeding. All right. So we'll go to that document. Not the infringement alleged impeding. The infringement is impeding. We'll look at that document. Sergio Perez. I couldn't find the footage of this, otherwise I'd put a link to it. Car 11 unnecessarily impeding car 27. Decision, drop of 3 grid positions for the next race, which will be that Grand Prix. The stewards heard from the driver of car 11 and driver of car 27. Team representatives reviewed positioning marshalling system data, video, telemetry, team radio, and in-car video evidence. Hulkenberg was on a fast lap when he approached turn 13. Perez, who was on an out lap, was at the apex of the turn, and Hulkenberg had to leave the racing line to drive around him. Hulkenberg was forced to lift the throttle early and brake early for that corner. So there's no mention this time about drivers driving to a delta. Okay, what we're saying is in the incident in Qatar, Max Verstappen was driving abnormally slowly. Okay, if the drivers are supposed to be have a minimum speed that they're driving to on track, there's no mention of that here. But they're saying that Max wasn't even driving to that. That is well, that in itself is a problem, isn't it? You see, what we also are presented with is different reasons for different infringements at different situations. There is no uniform set of criteria that they're judging this by, is there? We're instead given different reasons as to why we're going to give this penalty on this occasion and different reasons why we're not going to give this penalty on the next occasion. There should be a clear set of parameters. There really should be. But again, this is their method of picking and choosing who they're going to penalise, how they're going to penalise them, and who they're not going to penalise for whatever reason they don't want to penalise them for. And the person that they don't want to penalise always seems to be the same person. Okay? Now, again, we're in qualifying. This is the situation which is going to impact the start position of those races. Remember, Saudi wasn't qualifying. So therefore, are you going to impose a grid drop for a practice session infringement? Probably not. I think that would be harsh. If you're going to do that, make it uniform. Make it that regardless of which session it is, whether it's practice or whether it's qualifying, if you commit an offence, it's going to affect your race. Make it that way. And then everybody is aware of that. But certainly in terms of if you're going to commit an infringement that is going to affect your fellow competitor and their race chances due to their impacting their ability to set a time that's going to affect their grid position, that is really the thing that is having that effect. So a qualifying infringement is the sort of thing where you can categorically say that infringement there during that session is impacting that driver's ability to set a fast lap and their qualifying performance. Therefore, this is how we're going to then give you a consequence. The consequence is it's going to impact your race for what you've done, impacting their race. That's how it should be. Okay, so Perez gets the grid drop. Hulkenberg was on a fast lap when he approached turn 13. Perez, who was on an out lap, was at the apex of the turn, and Hulkenberg had to leave the racing line to drive around him. Very similar to what George Russell has had to do, but the argument in defence is that George wasn't on his fast lap. Okay, shouldn't really matter, should it? If George was going at a speed in preparation of his fast lap, maybe he's trying to build up momentum, maybe he's trying to sort his tyre temperature out, all of those things. Make sure that he didn't have dust on his tyres so that he'd got optimum grip of those tyres for when he was just about to begin his fast lap. If that has been affected before he even gets onto that fast lap, it's still affecting him, isn't it? So the notion of whether he's on the fast lap or whether he's not on the fast lap is irrespective. If you've had that impact on him, okay, you are impeding him. If you are illegally impeding him due to driving on the racing line at an inappropriate speed, a speed that is too slow, and still occupying the racing line, you are guilty of impeding. Okay, that is the situation. It is as simple as that. And Hulkenberg was forced to lift the throttle early and brake early for that corner. So again, that's what George Russell was required to do. And actually at the speed that George Russell was carrying, that actually meant he couldn't stay on the track. Left the track, hit that little thin strip of gravel, dirtying his tyres up. Okay. In reviewing the audio from Perez's car, the stewards observed that the team was focused on the car in front of Perez that had just slowed and did not give Perez a warning that Hulkenberg was behind him until 1 second before Hulkenberg arrived, and significantly too late to avoid impeding Hulkenberg. Whilst the stewards appreciate the dynamic situation facing the team and driver during the Q1 session, which was described in the hearing, the stewards find that Perez unnecessarily impeded Hulkenberg and issued a 3 grid place drop consistent with previous cases. Consistent with previous cases. The crime is unnecessarily impeded, which is what Perez was guilty of. Unnecessarily impeded. What was the mitigating factor? Again, I can't give you evidence of this. I can't divert you to evidence at the moment because I couldn't find the footage. I don't know if Perez has gone through a set of corners where he wouldn't have been able to pick up the fact that Hulkenberg was following. The mitigating circumstances for what Hamilton did, he's gone through a complex of corners on essentially a street circuit. Okay, you cannot have the visibility to see what's behind you. You can only see back, 20, 30, 40, 50 metres behind you, because if you've just come through a bend, having gone around that bend, you can't see back what's beyond the bend you've just come round. So if then you're not on a particularly fast lap, you're paying attention to the car that's directly behind you, which is Sainz, and a car comes at speed around that bend that you've not picked up, and all of a sudden you've tried to move out the way of Sainz, and in doing so, you've actually got in the way of something else that you hadn't picked up, and your team hasn't told you that they're arriving. That's a different set of circumstances to being on a car where maybe you do have visibility rearwards. You should be picking up this up. I can't tell you whether Perez was guilty of that or not. But the stewards are saying that Perez was guilty of unnecessarily impeding. I don't know if Perez's mind was focusing on a car that was behind him and Hulkenberg was behind that and approached on that. I can't tell you that, unfortunately. But what they've determined is that Perez was guilty of unnecessarily impeding, and the stewards issued a 3 grid place drop, consistent with previous cases. Consistent. Max gets a 1 grid place drop. That's not consistent. Why is it that when Max is guilty of an infringement, the penalty that they award to Max Verstappen is not consistent? Now, the strap-on fanboy, it's not because I'm a Max hater, it's because I'm identifying that this is a consistent dynamic. Whenever Max does something, the penalty applied to Max is not consistent with the penalties that are applied to everybody else. That is a problem. That demonstrates that there is a consistent bias towards Max Verstappen, your favourite. I know that you would like to project that consistent bias is actually towards Lewis Hamilton, and I know that you would like to project that bias is always anti-Max. Oh, they're always penalising my favourite driver, Max Verstappen, and it's not fair. But when you take off those orange tinted spectacles, when you take off your Max Verstappen is my favourite driver racing helmet, right? Well, you won't possess the ability to do this, sadly. You won't. Unfortunately, this is you. Okay, you're victims. You're always the victim, and you deal with your problems by attacking other people rather than going and having a look, looking at the evidence and justifying your position, which you won't do, and evidencing your position, which you won't do. Instead, you'll just project that everybody else is the criminal, everybody else is the hater, you're the victim, and everybody else is a psychopath and a hater and mentally deranged. Because that's what you have, isn't it? That's all you have. But there's the evidence. That's the evidence of somebody who has been found guilty by the FIA of unnecessarily impeding and had imposed upon them the 3-place grid drop, which is consistent with previous cases. So that was that one. That's at the Australian Grand Prix, the third race of the season. Like I say, that's the summons for the alleged offence, and that's the infringement of actually being guilty of the offence. It's no longer an allegation. So the next race of the season after Australia was the Japanese Grand Prix. No more further summons there prior to the race. So we'll go to the Japanese Grand Prix. Here it is. And we'll see if there's any infringements during qualifying there. That's during the race. Post-race, final qualifying classification. Infringement, unsafe release. So there you go. Car 63, unsafe release, infringement. Summons, alleged unsafe release. Infringement, unsafe released. So the infringement is no longer an allegation, is it? So that's what we've got there. We've not got any impeding by the looks of things there at Japan. So we won't worry about that one. All right, so they will go to the next Grand Prix, which is the Chinese Grand Prix. We'll have a look at the documents there. Over to China. Again, we'll see what took place prior to the Grand Prix. Infringement, overtaking under safety car conditions. Okay, that's not an allegation either. Okay, what you get is you get a summons for alleged overtaking, and then you get a decision which is overtaking under, because the allegation is no longer an allegation when it's been determined that it's actually, yes, it is an infringement. So prior to the race, pit lane infringement, no longer an allegation of it. Infringement, causing a collision. That was, I think, in the sprint race, I believe. Might be wrong. Going down here. So that's just event notes. Let's just check that we're not missing out anything here. Summons for an incident, and then we got a infringement, a decision that somebody's caused a collision. Okay, I believe that was in the sprint. Okay, different dynamics. We're not talking about impeding during either practice sessions or qualifying now. So I'm not going to go into that at this stage. So the race after the Chinese Grand Prix was the Miami Grand Prix, race 6 of the season. So let's have a look at the documents for that. So we come to the Miami Grand Prix, and we come to Entering the pit lane. No, I'm going to forget that one. We're going to do the grid. So provisional starting grid. So prior to that, the final qualifying classification. What might have gone on? Alleged pit lane infringement. Alleged unsportsmanlike behaviour. Okay. Alleged pit lane infringement. Leaving the track without a justifiable reason multiple times. Did they have a sprint race there? Yeah, they did. Okay. Summons. Car 4 crossing the track. Infringement. Incident with car 81. Sprint qualifying 1. Let's have a look what car 77's infringement was with car 81 in SQ1. I've not looked at this one. Let's have a look at what this one is. So, Bottas, what's he done? Drop of 3 grid positions for next sprint session. Okay. The stewards have heard from driver of 81, Piastri, and driver of car 77, Bottas, team representative, and reviewed positioning, marshalling system data, video timing, telemetry, team radio, and in-car video evidence, determined that the driver of car 77 unnecessarily impeded car 81 during the sprint qualifying. So we're talking about a qualifying session for a sprint race, right? Impacting somebody's potential grid position, okay? And we're talking about impeding. On the straight before turn 1, car 77 was being driven slowly on the racing line after finishing a fast lap, whilst car 81 was approaching on a fast lap. Okay, car 81 and car 77 needed to take car 81 and car 77 needed to take evasive action to avoid a collision. The primary responsibility rests with the driver to ensure he does not place himself in a position whereby he unnecessarily impedes another driver. Here, car 77 was driving slowly on the racing line and caused the situation that ensued. There is your criteria as to how you determine this situation. It's in black and white. The primary responsibility rests with the driver to ensure that he does not place himself in a position whereby he unnecessarily impedes another driver. Here, car 77 was driving slowly on the racing line and caused to the situation that ensued. However, during the hearing, both team and driver of car 77 admitted that the team had not warned the driver of car 77 that car 81 was on an approaching fast lap, and that was obviously an error on the team's part that contributed significantly to the incident. In light of the above, we impose a penalty drop. So in light of Bottas not being informed by his team, that was a mitigating factor that they only gave him a 3-place grid drop, is what they're saying there. Otherwise, if they judged Valtteri Bottas to have been doing something on purpose, maybe the penalty would have been worse than that. But maybe because his team didn't tell him, it was only just 3 places. Nischetti, Andrew Malilu, Vitantonio Luizzi. So, that was that one. Let's try and find the one that we're dealing with. This is just 6 races in. 6 races in, we've seen Gary Connolly in there. This one here. Unusually, this incident occurred when neither car was on a push lap. It's irrelevant. Okay, the penalty would most have likely been the usual 3 grid position penalty. However, in mitigation of penalty, it was obvious the driver of car 63 had clear visibility. It's not his responsibility, is it? It's the driver of car 1's responsibility. Okay. Stewards regard this case as a complicated one, in that clearly car 1 did not comply with the race. So yeah, car 1 did not comply with the race director's event notes, and clearly was driving, in our determination, unnecessarily slowly, considering the circumstances. What's complicated, lads? Oh, it's complicated because it's Max Verstappen and we're not allowed to apply a penalty to Max Verstappen. That complicates the situation, doesn't it? All right? It was obvious that the driver of car one was attempting to cool his tyres. Irrelevant. I don't care. It's his responsibility to not impede anybody else. Oh, but he was trying to make his tyres colder. Yeah, but he wanted cold tyres. He wanted cold. It's irrelevant. Your responsibility is not to impede. So why are these professionals, these motor racing professionals, supposedly, oh, but they're doing it voluntary. They're doing it out of the goodness of their own heart. Derek Warwick there, he's flown out to Qatar. He's just done that. He's spent all that money himself to fly out to Qatar. He's rocked up at the circuit and he's gone, I'll volunteer to be the steward here, lads, if you want my help. He's done this out of the goodness of his own heart because it's a voluntary position from Derek Warwick, the Great White Hope, owner of a car dealership, a used car salesman there in Jersey, selling Hondas. Who's the other guy? Gary Connolly. He's flown all the way from Australia to Qatar, again, out of the goodness of his own heart. He's paid out of his own money that flight ticket over to Qatar, and he's rocked up at the circuit to volunteer to steward this event as well, to decide, I'll volunteer to adjudicate for these decisions. I don't have a professional qualification to make decisions in accordance with the regulations of this sport. But I'll tell you what I think in the comment section. And it's obvious that he was attempting to cool his tyres. He could also see Car 63 approaching as he looked in his mirror multiple times whilst on the small straight. Oh, that makes it complicated. So you've just said that actually Max Verstappen could clearly see a guy approaching him. He clearly knew he was driving slowly. He clearly knew he was on the racing line. You've identified that. And you're saying, oh, but it was George's fault. There, George could see this. But here, the primary responsibility rests with the driver to ensure that he does not place himself in a position whereby he unnecessarily impedes another driver. 3-place grid drop. 3-place grid drop. This is just 6 races into a 24-race season. 3-place grid drop to Valtteri Bottas for doing it. 3-place grid drop to Sergio Perez for doing it. And when Hamilton is guilty of it, that's in a practice session, okay, that doesn't actually determine the grid places for those competitors. Hamilton hasn't impacted Sargent's starting position. Hasn't affected his qualifying time. But he's still determined, despite the mitigating circumstances here, of lacking the ability to see the competitor behind that he ultimately impeded, and actually was trying to get out of the way of Sainz in this situation. But Hamilton, they still nailed him for a €15,000 fine. But Max, Wonder Boy, will just give him a 1-place grid drop. And a little story from Connolly and Warwick, who are there at the goodness of their own hearts. That's all I'm doing on this video. I might do another one for the next 6 races and the next 6 races and see if we've got alternative examples. Because I could do this, I could go through every race here and it would last for another half hour, 45 minutes and people would switch off. But there's examples. They are the precedent set. That is the standard penalty for committing that offence. But Max Verstappen doesn't get that standard penalty. Max Verstappen just gets a 1 grid place drop. And the strap-on fanboy will be here going, Oh, look at this guy. He hates Max Verstappen. I'm just pointing out to you that this is the dynamics of the situation. And you feel like you're victims, don't you, lads, when you're beneficiaries? Okay? Your favourite is the beneficiary, and yet you'll present that you're the victims here, aren't you? But there's the evidence of what actually happens to drivers when they're guilty of an offence. There's the evidence of what these stewards from the FIA, they're all volunteers. There's no consistency. What one volunteer will determine is right is not the same as others. But here, the primary responsibility rests with the driver to ensure that he does not place himself in a position whereby he unnecessarily impedes another driver. And here, car 77 was driving slowly on the racing line and caused the situation that ensued. That is exactly what Max Verstappen has just done, but Max Verstappen just gets a 1 grid place drop. That's not consistent. That's a problem. Those inconsistencies always appear to benefit Max Verstappen. Rather strange. Rather strange. This is the shit show that we're all watching. That demonstrates that there's a governing body that is not fit for purpose. That demonstrates that what we're watching is a contrivance. When one competitor always gets beneficial decisions, something is entirely corrupt. Now, you like the outcomes of that. You'll pretend that when even this penalty, even the 1 place grid penalty, is the British bias against Max Verstappen. Look at them targeting Max again. Max the victim when Max is the beneficiary. Max is the perpetrator who has benefited by the severe lack of appropriate consequence yet again. Yet again. And that is the truth. That you can't handle the truth because you're strap-on fanboys. Come out with some evidence to counter this. Make a video. Disprove me. But you can't. Instead, all you'll do, you'll make a little comment in the comment section. You'll make 5 comments in the comment section, won't you, kids? That's all you've got. None of you have got the ability to counter this. Do it. Do it. Make me eat my words. That'll be it for this video. If I can find any more examples, I'll make another one. Happy Qatar Grand Prix, everybody. I can't wait. It's so exciting. It's only live once. None of us know what's going to happen. It's going to be brilliant. I can't wait. See you in a bit.